summer was always a quiet time for Lena, an introverted 16-year-old. She lived with her mother, Clara, in a simple house on the outskirts of the city. During the vacations, she used to spend hours decorating her room, her refuge from the world. She loved scouring antique fairs in search of unique objects, and it was on one of these visits that something caught her eye. The mirror. It was a mirror with a golden frame, decorated with details that looked like faded arabesques. Despite its worn appearance, there was something about it that caught her eye. The seller, an elderly man, explained that the mirror had belonged to an old circus, but gave no further details. Lena found this intriguing, although it seemed like just an exaggerated story to enhance the value of the object. For just a few dollars, she took the mirror home. When she arrived, she placed the mirror next to the window, where the evening light bathed the glass in orange hues. "It's perfect," she thought. Over the next few days, Lena didn't think much about the mirror until she decided to take a selfie to post on social media. That's when the discomfort began. While reviewing the photo on her cell phone, Lena noticed something strange. In the background, reflected in the mirror, was a figure she couldn't immediately identify. With a wide smile and exaggeratedly round eyes, the figure looked like a clown, one that shouldn't be there. Confused, she erased the photo, convinced that it was some trick of the light or a glitch in the camera. The following evening, while she was finishing her homework, Lena noticed something out of the corner of her eye. The mirror, motionless in the corner of the room, seemed to glow subtly under the light of the lamp. She tried to ignore it, but a shiver ran down her spine. She felt as if she was being watched. Trying to push the thoughts away, she approached the mirror, analyzing her own reflected image. Everything looked normal. She touched the frame, but it was as cold as ice. She took a deep breath and went back to bed. But that night, the dream was disturbing. Lena dreamed of the clown she had seen in the selfie. He was in a dark place, surrounded by mirrors. He smiled at her, but didn't move. His laughter was muffled, almost like a distant echo. When she woke up, gasping, the mirror seemed brighter than before, even though the room was plunged into darkness. "It's just a coincidence," she repeated to herself, trying to calm down. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. The next morning, she decided to investigate the mirror more closely. She took a flashlight and began to examine every detail of the frame. That's when she found something that made her shudder. Engraved on the underside, almost invisible under the dust, was a name, Chuckle. Lena swallowed. A feeling of unease overwhelmed her. The clown had a name, and she felt that he was no longer just in her dreams. That morning, Lena couldn't get the name Little Laughter out of her head. It was a childish name, almost comical, but it sounded strange and out of place. As much as she tried to ignore it, she felt its constant presence. Every time she entered the room, she had the impression that the mirror seemed to call out to her, as if demanding her attention. The first real event happened the following evening. Lena was sitting at her study table, trying to concentrate on a book, when she heard a soft, metallic sound, like something scraping lightly against glass. She turned sharply towards the mirror, but saw nothing unusual. Just a reflection of the room illuminated by the yellow lamp. She sighed with relief, attributing the noise to the wind or the old window that always creaked. But when she looked in the mirror again, she saw something different. There was no movement, but she was sure that the light inside the reflection seemed darker than in the rest of the room, as if the mirror was showing a slightly altered version of reality. She turned off the light and went to sleep, trying to ignore the uncomfortable feeling. However, the silence of the early morning brought more unease. Lena woke to a muffled laugh. It was low but clear, coming from the corner of the room. The sound seemed to blend in with the noise of the wind outside, but it was distinct enough to make her sit up in bed, her heart racing. "Is anyone there?" he asked in a trembling voice. The room was empty. The laughter ceased, leaving an oppressive silence. Lena looked in the mirror. It was still, reflecting only the darkness of the room. The next morning, she tried to tell her mother what had happened, but Clara paid little attention. She said that Lena was tired or that perhaps she had watched something scary before going to bed. However, the rational explanation didn't erase the shiver that came over her every time she looked in the mirror. The following days brought more incidents. Objects in her room began to appear in different places, always close to the mirror. Books that she knew she had left on the shelf appeared at the foot of the cabinet. Her hairbrushes and rings mysteriously disappeared, only to reappear on the floor next to the mirror. The photos on her cell phone also became strange. Whenever she took a new photo in her room, the clown appeared in the background. It didn't matter the angle or the lighting. He was always there, with the same wide smile and empty eyes that seemed to pierce your soul. Determined to understand what was going on, Lena started researching the name Laffy and the mirror on the internet. She didn't find anything very relevant at first, just old articles about circuses and famous clowns. But a post on an obscure forum caught her eye. Has anyone ever heard of Laughing Clown? He disappeared in a circus in the 1930s. It is said that his soul was trapped in a mirror, cursing anyone who possessed it. He first appears in photos, then in your dreams. Finally, he takes you. Lena's blood ran cold. Every detail corresponded to what she was experiencing. As she read, she felt a shiver run up her spine. She turned slowly towards the mirror, and this time she was sure there was movement. A shadow passed across the bottom of the reflection, too fast to be a trick of the light. That's when he realized that the clown's smile in the glass was a little wider than before. Every day, Lena's discomfort intensified. The clown was becoming more present, more real. She no longer needed photos to see him, all she had to do was look in the mirror. And every time she did, he seemed to get closer. One night, unable to ignore the noises coming from the corner of the room, Lena made an impulsive decision. She covered the mirror with a sheet. The feeling of relief was immediate, as if she had put a barrier between herself and the clown's gaze. But the relief was short-lived. In the middle of the night, she was woken by a sound. A slow, continuous scratching. Lena sat up in bed, her heart racing, and turned on the light. The sheet she had placed over the mirror was on the floor, carefully folded. On the glass, a blurred message appeared, as if written with a finger in the mist. "Do you see me?" She ran out of the room, trembling with fear. She went into the kitchen, where her mother was reading a book. "Mom, there's something wrong with that mirror. It's trying to talk to me," she said, desperate. Clara frowned, worried. "Lena, you need to rest. You've been spending too much time alone in this room. We'll sort it out tomorrow, okay?" But Lena knew she couldn't wait. As soon as her mother went to bed, she decided to act. She returned to her room, armed with a flashlight and her cell phone. Determined, she began to investigate the mirror once more. The golden frame seemed to vibrate slightly under her fingers, and the name Laughing Girl seemed deeper, as if it had been freshly carved. Lena began recording with her cell phone as she analyzed every detail, narrating what she saw. Then something strange happened. In the video, the reflection of the room looked different. Although it was in the same place, the shadows were denser and seemed to move subtly. At the bottom of the reflection, something caught her eye, a red curtain, like the ones you see on circus stages. When she lifted her eyes from her cell phone to look directly in the mirror, the curtain was there too. It didn't make sense, there were no curtains in the room. Lena's breathing became labored. With trembling hands, she touched the glass, and a wave of cold ran through her body. Suddenly, the curtain in the reflection began to open slowly, revealing a figure in the center, the clown. He stood there, motionless, with the same wide smile and empty stare. But this time, he wasn't standing still. He slowly raised his hand and pointed at Lena. She stepped back, tripping over a chair, and the cell phone fell out of her hands. The sound of muffled laughter filled the room, coming from all sides. The voice echoed, repeating the words, "Come watch the big show." Lena screamed, grabbed her cell phone and ran out of the room, locking the door behind her. The next morning, while reviewing the recorded video, she realized something terrifying. In the reflection of the mirror, when she had tripped, the clown had taken a step forward. He was no longer stuck at the bottom of the mirror. He was getting closer. From that moment on, Lena avoided entering the room. She left the door locked and went to sleep on the sofa in the living room. But the mirror seemed to be calling her, even from a distance. Every night, the sound of laughter echoed through the house, closer and closer, making it impossible to ignore. Determined to put an end to it, Lena went back to the forum where she had found information about Laughing Girl. She decided to create a thread detailing what was happening. Within minutes, she received a private message from a user with the name Vidros Velados. "You need to get rid of that mirror immediately. Covering it up is no use. It's attached to you now. The only solution is to break it, but be careful, there are risks. He might try to stop you." Lena hesitated. The idea of facing the clown was terrifying, but she couldn't go on living with that nightmare. She plucked up her courage, gathered her tools, a hammer and a screwdriver, and went to her room. The silence in the corridor was suffocating. When she unlocked the door, she felt the air cold and heavy, as if something was waiting for her. The mirror was there, untouched, but now it seemed to pulse, emitting a faint hum. "Enough of this," she said, more to herself than to whatever was in the mirror. She approached slowly, hammer in hand. In the reflection, the room looked different. The red curtain was still there, but now there were chairs arranged like in an auditorium. The clown stood in the center of the stage, watching her. When Lena raised the hammer, his voice echoed through the room, deep and vibrant. "You don't want to break the show, do you? Stay and have fun. I promise it will be unforgettable." The reflection changed. She saw herself inside the mirror, sitting on one of the chairs. The other chairs were filled with indistinct figures, shadows that seemed to be applauding and laughing. On the stage, the clown held something in his hands, a mask identical to Lena's face. She shook her head, trying to shut out the sight. "No! You're not going to trap me here." With all her strength, Lena struck a blow against the mirror. The first blow made the frame vibrate, but the glass remained intact. The clown laughed, loudly and gravely, and took another step towards the mirror. With each blow, the glass seemed to resist more, as if it were made of something unbreakable. Lena screamed in frustration, but didn't give up. With one final blow, the mirror shattered into dozens of pieces, scattering shards across the floor. The laughter stopped immediately. The room fell completely silent. Lena fell to the floor, exhausted, looking at the fragments of the mirror. In each broken piece, she saw reflections of the circus, the chairs, and the clown, as if he were trapped in each fragment. For a moment, he thought he had won. But then one of the pieces moved. In the reflection of one of the shards, the clown was still there, smiling. His voice echoed one last time, low and menacing. "Do you think it's over? The show's just beginning." Lena quickly picked up all the fragments and put them in a garbage bag. She hurried out of the house and threw the shards into a nearby lake. She stayed there, watching them sink, hoping that it was over for good. But when she got home, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. On her cell phone, which she had left on the living room table, a notification flashed. It was a photo she had taken without realizing it. and it was Lena's reflection, with her face painted like a clown's and the same macabre smile as Laughlin. The next few days were tense. Lena tried to go about her routine, but every noise or shadow around her seemed to remind her that the presence of Laughing Man was still there, latent, watching her. However, since she had thrown the shards into the lake, no new inexplicable events had occurred. She began to believe that perhaps the nightmare was over. That evening, she tried to relax. She watched a movie with her mother and went to bed early. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could sleep without jolts. But in the middle of the night, he woke up to a strange sensation. A muffled sound was coming from outside. Laughter. Lena got up with difficulty, her body overcome with tiredness, and went to the window. She looked out into the garden and saw something that made her freeze. On the lawn, there were rows of old chairs, like in a small open-air theater. And in the center, a red curtain. Lena's blood ran cold. No, this can't be real. She closed her eyes, trying to shut out the vision, but when she opened them, the chairs were still there. A figure appeared in the middle of them, the clown, Chuckles. He smiled and pointed directly at Lena's bedroom window, inviting her in with a slow, threatening gesture. She stepped back, feeling her throat closing up. Her breathing was heavy, but she had to react. Lena ran down the stairs and opened the back door. Holding a flashlight and full of adrenaline, she marched into the strange scene. As she approached the chairs, she noticed something that made her stomach turn. Each seat was occupied by an indistinct figure, motionless shadows with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. They seemed to be applauding silently, like a macabre audience. "What do you want from me?" shouted Lena, her voice trembling. Chuckle came out from behind the curtain, smiling even wider than before. He spread his arms, as if presenting something grand. "The final show, Lena. You're the star." Before she could react, she felt the ground give way beneath her feet. The world spun, and she fell into a dark, cold void. When she opened her eyes, she was sitting on a chair in the auditorium. Only this time, she was part of the show. On stage, someone or something appeared. It was Lena. Or at least her reflected version, with the clown makeup. The copy smiled at her before bowing in exaggerated reverence. Lena tried to get up, but she was trapped. All around her, the shadows were clapping and laughing. The sound was deafening. "Welcome to the big show, Lena. You'll never leave." Laugh was right. From that moment on, Lena became just another one of the mirror's audience, an indistinct shadow eternally applauding the clown's show. In the real world, her mother went into her room to wake her up the next morning and found only the mirror, intact, hanging on the wall. In it, the reflection of the room seemed empty, except for a chair in the corner. On the chair, there was a shadow smiling.